Hey, it's Anna and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today we're going to be comparing the book On the Come Up to the movie. I just read this in my last video, my April readathon, and I didn't realize that this was a movie until I did some research during the readathon. So I wanted to compare the two. Now, as you can see, we're kind of in a different setup, and that's because I'm going to be watching the movie on my TV. I'm not sure if this is something where I could have played clips or whatnot. So what I'm gonna do instead is whatever part of the movie that I'm going to be talking about or comparing, I'll put a little screenshot here of the clip that I'm talking about, because again, I really don't want to get in trouble with sharing videos or whatnot. I did pay for this movie on Amazon Prime. I think I have high hopes for this movie. I looked up some of the reviews, and IMDb, it was kind of low. Rotten Tomatoes was okay, and then Movie Insider, I think, was 4.5 out of 5. That aside, what I really care about is how accurate is it to this book. This is a pretty thick book, 450 some pages, so I'm sure they had to cut some stuff, but I'm curious how much they cut versus how much they just straight up changed. Let's get started. Okay, we're 52 seconds into the movie, but it's already starting out differently. I should add, obviously, because we're comparing the book to the movie, there will be spoilers. But if you want to read it for yourself, I'd probably skip this one and catch me in the next video. Starting off, the first line on the come up is, "I might have to kill somebody tonight." And as you can see, we're looking at little kid Bree. I'm curious if in the movie we're just starting out seeing her dad, because her dad was murdered at a young age, and she talks about her mom when she was young a lot, when her mom had a lot of drug addiction. Curious to see if that's where we're starting out instead of, again, in the book. We're starting with Bree as a 16-year-old in ACT prep, just waiting to get on with her day, see if she gets the call from DJ Hype to battle in the ring. Already starting off just a little bit differently between the book and the movie. Okay, so this whole first scene showed us, and I think pretty decent summary to do early on, that Bree, for whatever reason, was staying at their grandparents' house. However, it still looked like her dad was alive in that flashback, which Jay, Bree's mom, didn't have Bree and Trey, Bree's brother, go to their grandparents' house until after Lawless, their dad was already dead, and when Jay was doing a lot of drugs at this time. So again, curious what kind of narrative they're changing. One thing that I really like, and I feel like these are the small details that you can take from the book and put into movies pretty easily, is that Bree is wearing a Star Wars hoodie. And throughout the book, Bree talks about, that kind of nerdy side, that more silly side, where she talks about Star Wars and her love of Tweety Bird and things like that. So I love that they kept that consistent. However, she did not walk to the ring herself in the book. Her aunt drove her, but that's okay. Beside the point. So in the book, there's a whole other battle that happens before Bree's battle, and it looks like we're skipping over that. They mentioned somebody in the movie named Infamous Mills, who I think is supposed to be D Nice in the book. So already some little character name and changes, and I don't exactly know why people do that between movies and books. They also use SoundCloud in the movie, which I'm really happy that they were able to use SoundCloud, because I think in the book it's called Dat Cloud, and you know what Angie was referring to, so I'm happy they were able to actually use SoundCloud in the movie. Okay, so it's Lil Law, not what Bree calls herself in the book, versus M. Dot. No clue who that is. That person was not in the book. I'm curious to see, because something is obviously going to change at this point. It's deviating from the book quite a bit now. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen, since Angie Thomas in the book wrote out all of the raps. So I'm curious if they're going to use anything, straight away from Angie's book in the movie. This is very different. M. Dot brought up a line talking about Bree's mom's drug addiction. In the book, when she goes up against Miles the first time, he brings up her dad. So already a little different there, and obviously against a very different person who's a grown man. That's a little creepy to me. At least with Miles in the book, they're the same age. Kids insulting kids isn't really ideal, but an adult insulting a kid, I don't know. I guess that's how the battle works, but this man looks like he's 30. Battling the kid, I don't know, just a little funky to me. Now I know in this next part Bree is supposed to freeze up in the first round, and then there are 2 other rounds where she really comes back. I'm curious if that's gonna happen. So Bree just completely froze, and that is, again, not something that happens. In the book, she freezes once and then comes back for the other 2 rounds. So I think that's an interesting change, because I feel like Bree in the book, we see that little pause and then we see her growth almost immediately, winning her first battle and whatnot. Like, it's very clear where her path is going, whereas the movie, it seems like they wanted to build more tension, I guess, and not let Bree have the successes early on in the movie as she did in the book. I'm really glad that they kept the bus, like just having the bus interactions in the movie, even though we're not exactly following the book, whereas in this bus scene, clearly everyone's kind of like, ooh, she lost last night. But in the book, it's a lot of excitement. Everyone saw her video. I think some of the other changes are interesting, where Bree is clearly selling candy for money and Jay saw and just kind of let it slide. Whereas in the book, Aunt Pooh provides the candy and then Bree keeps all the profits. That's a little bit different. And one of the things that is consistent though is that Trey calls her Little Bit, which is the nickname that most folks use in the book in terms of her family. So I think that's really cute that they kept that. It's interesting when they pick and choose what to keep in the book. I'm interested to see what they'll continue to keep and what they'll continue to lose. I feel like On the Come Up as a book deals with a lot of heavier themes in terms of poverty and racial injustices, and I like that they're not shying away from the racial injustices by already having Long and Tate search somebody else's bag who is also not white, because in the book we really only see Bree's interaction with Long and Tate. We don't see anybody else's. I think that's just a nice little detail to add in there to really emphasize the point of, you know, these folks are being obviously discriminatory against the non-white students of the school, and keeping Jay poverty line and saying, this was a little earlier in the movie where she said she has something special for dinner tonight. I mean, it's going to be clear that, you know, poverty is still going to be an issue that's addressed with the hot water being shut off. Jay most likely has lost her job in the movie, and I'm interested to see what the interaction between Bree, Long and Tate being the security guards, what that's going to look like, because I know that was a really impactful part of the book for me. I'm curious how they did it, bringing it to the screen. Okay, so I feel like the scene where Brianna has her interaction with Long and Tate, seeing it was even worse than reading it. It's so heartbreaking because you see it actually happen. You've seen the videos on TikTok and on YouTube and on the news and everything. It's heartbreaking to see again and again and again. The interaction between the principal, Jay, and Brianna, that was very similar to the book. In the book, though, the rhyme that aggressive is with excessive, and they changed it in the movie to oppressive. So I thought that was really interesting. And then little backtracking, there is supposed to be some romantic tension that Bree has towards Malik, but it's clear that it looks almost mutual. And so that's going to be really interesting, because in the book, there's a different love interest than Malik that comes in. I'm curious how that is all going to play out as well. Right now, I'm on page 68 of the book, and that's where the principal intervention ends. We're like this much through the book, technically, where the movie is, and the movie's been on for like 15 minutes. Definitely some different choices between the book and the movie. I like the transparency that's already happening between Jay and Bree, because it's somewhat similar to how it is in the book, where, you know, Brianna's asking these questions and Jay's kind of like, I'm figuring it out. Like, she's not directly answering the question, I guess, not full transparency, but she is saying like, I'm looking for work, I'm gonna pawn stuff, not just saying, don't ask me that, I'm the adult. So having kind of an open conversation. But why I paused it here is because Brianna just tried to hand over her lawless chain, and that is quite a bit later in the book that Brianna gets this chain. They've definitely changed the timeline on when they get the chain, and I didn't think the chain looked like how it does in the movie in the book, but I also just could have like read that wrong. In my mind, it was silver. I could have missed the detail about it being gold, but she definitely didn't have it this early on in the book as compared to the movie, because that chain does get very important once she has it. And I think it's interesting how they did it early, because that means that they're not going to go through a scene of finding her dad's stuff and Brianna going through her dad's stuff and all that. Seems like that has already happened. I'm curious if we'll get it as a flashback though. So they're back at the ring. In the book, we don't go back to the ring until way later, until after Brianna has recorded a song, and then they don't even make it into the ring again until like the very, very end of the book is when they go back to the ring. So we only go to the ring twice, at least in the book. Maybe we're going to be showing up at the ring more and more so that Brianna can have her redemption moment. But I'm very curious to see how they're choosing to do this in the movie, because obviously since they changed that beginning to where Brianna doesn't necessarily have a successful start, they would have had to get her there somehow. An interesting change there. Let's see where it's going to go. We're pretty off book now. We're pretty much not like the book at all. Miles is the one with the record deal. So they pretty much got rid of D Nice, who's in the book. Miles is the kid that Bree battled in the first part of the book, but apparently now he has the big record deal. He's kind of like the big shot around the ring, and he's talking about how he's like doing it for the garden. But in the book, I mean, it talks about him living in the suburbs. Maybe they're gonna show that disparity as well of him living in the suburbs in the movie. I do love how they kept swaggerific. No, that's probably cringy. I'm so glad they brought it to life. I think that's so funny. So again, we're pretty off book, but I'm interested to see where it goes. I mean, the only thing similar are like the characters' names at this point. And I guess that Supreme is the manager is also the same, but again, very different scenario. So we have the redemption moment of Bree going up against Miles, and they took some, especially for Miles' rap, they took some of the lines directly from the book, which I really like. I almost wish they had a little bit more of Bree's self-reflection in the movie, just to kind of show her thought process while she was putting her rap together. But otherwise, I thought it was pretty good. I'm interested to see what's going to happen next, because now, again, we're kind of back on track with the book in the sense of we just went a little bit out of order with the incident with Long and Tate happening first in the movie, and then having Brianna starting to, you know, have her come up, whereas in the book she wins in the ring first on her come up, but then has the Long and Tate incident. So they kind of flip-flopped it, which I can maybe see how that flows a little bit easier, because this movie feels like it's gone by pretty quick so far. It's only been 23 minutes, but still technically we're around like here in the book. We'll see if we skip like a big chunk coming up soon. I'm gonna have to flip through the book a little bit to find where we are, but Supreme is trying to talk to Bree, and Pooh is actually intervening. If I remember correctly, Pooh and Supreme never even talk in the book. They never overlap. So this is definitely a change. Pooh actually seems like she's stepping up as a manager, where in the book, she was kind of lacking as a manager because she was running her drug deals on the side. So this is a very interesting dynamic that I feel like the book never really gets to, because it just doesn't happen with the way Pooh is so focused on the drug dealing side of her life. I'm interested to see now the dynamic between Pooh and Supreme that clearly exists in the movie that never existed in the book. So Pooh and Jade don't really have that many interactions in the book either. Like, Pooh is very much a character that mainly interacts with Brianna. So it's interesting how the movie is having Pooh interact with Bree's mom, with Supreme, and then having that little scuffle at the ring in the movie. That's similar to what happens in the book, where Pooh and Bree can't get in the book because Pooh and some of the other gang members in the Crowns, if I remember correctly, then they get into the scuffle outside of the ring, and that's where Pooh and Bree aren't allowed back in. So it didn't escalate to that much in the movie to where they're now kicked out. Maybe they will be, I don't know. But definitely this interaction of like making food together and everything, not something that happens in the book. And so I'm curious to see, because at the end of the book, Pooh is in prison, and I'm curious if she's still going to be in prison in the movie. Okay, so I'm trying to find where it is in the book, but I feel like they kind of summed up a lot in this one restaurant scene with Malik and Sunny. And I think that Malik still wanting to be the one to organize and put everything together, that's pretty accurate to the book. And, you know, him saying that he was video recording it, I know that matches up with the book, and saying that they're going to go to the administration. Bree says she doesn't want to be the poster child for this. She wants to focus on being Lil Law, which, you know, that still isn't her name in the book. But so Bree actually finds out about the drug dealing rumors on page 114 after she's recorded her song already. So they're really pushing back the recording of her song. She doesn't find out from her friends. She finds out from an article online. So we have that difference there. I think it's interesting with Malik bringing it to Bree's attention then, because now there's a different type of tension between them, where Malik really wants you know, Tate and Long brought down, bringing justice to everything, and Bree's like, I don't want to be at the center of that. I don't want to be in the middle of it. That dynamic is very accurate to the book, whereas the love tension that was a little bit earlier in the movie was not as accurate to the book, at least from both sides. So I think that's interesting. I'm curious if the second love interest is going to come in soon, or like what exactly is going to happen there. They also skip a whole part about going to church. Like, there is a whole interaction with Bree's grandma and grandpa at church that I feel like has now been skipped. That's really interesting. I'm curious if they're ever going to go to church, if they're going to bring in the grandparents at all then. Because again, they're kind of picking and choosing, changing the order of what happens in the book to what happens in the movie. We'll see if we even get to see Grandma and Grandpa in the movie, because they're pretty apparent in the book. So they aren't actually able to get into the ring. Again, somewhat going back to the accuracy of the book, but again, kind of picking and choosing moments, changing around how the book is written to more fit the movie. So there's a whole battle that happens between Mystique and Bree, and Mystique does show up again and again and again in the books in relation to Trey, but Bree and Mystique don't have this like rap battle interaction, but we see Supreme kind of eyeing this spontaneous battle. So I feel like that's his gateway again to try to get Bree under his management, which does happen in the book. I'm curious to see how that's going to progress throughout the rest of the movie. Bree and Supreme are going to have a conversation that they do have in the book, but like way later. I'm talking like past the halfway point of the book. Bree and Supreme have this conversation, and we're not halfway through the movie yet, which is different. And in the book, where Miles, Supreme, and Bree first talk is after Bree can't get in the ring. And in the movie, what it looks like is that Bree was the one that reached out to Supreme. So Bree's motivation seems slightly different than in the book, because she was really struggling in the book with staying loyal to Pooh and then finally giving over to Supreme to hopefully, you know, support her family. Whereas it seems like that switch happens a lot quicker when it comes to the movie. This is probably just me, but I learned that Infamous and Miles, I learned that they're two different people. That's my bad for thinking that Miles and Infamous were the same person. Oopsie daisy. But they are different. So they just renamed D-Nice to be Infamous, and they're not showing his face at all. Whereas in the book, D-Nice actually talks to Bree at one point. Okay, quite a few thoughts. One, Bree completely changing her look. I understand why they're doing it for the movie, to show Supreme's influence over her. I'm glad they kept the Tims in there, because that's such a vital part for her. But I just realized, because of how Aunt Pooh and Bree break up in the movie, they don't really do that in the book. We're gonna miss some critical scenes that happen between Aunt Pooh, Bree, and then also Jojo, a little kid in the neighborhood. I don't think Jojo's gonna be in this movie. I don't think the other love interest is now going to be in this movie, whose name is Curtis in the book. Don't think he's going to be there. I think it's pretty much going to be Malik, which is interesting. So a lot of changes. The one thing that I am happy they're keeping, even though they're doing it differently, is the relationship that's going to form between Miles and Sunny. That's in the book done through Instagram accounts. They don't really share their real names. They talk about Sunny's art, which hasn't been featured in the movie at all. It's just Miles and Sunny actually talking to each other in Atlanta. They don't go to Atlanta in the book. They also, all four, don't hang out together until like the first time Sunny and Miles meet in person. Again, a lot of changes. I understand what the movie is doing again to show Supreme's influence over her, because I really don't think Supreme had that much influence over her in the book until near the end, where he tried to get her to rap a certain verse, and she did, but then she ends up never performing that verse live. I feel like they're showing that Supreme has a lot more control over her in the movie, because there's still like an hour and 10 minutes left of the movie, you know? They have to show how important Supreme is. So I get what they're doing. It makes me kind of sad, because I like how the book is better in terms of that relationship that Brianna and Supreme have. I feel like at least 20 minutes go by with how much happens in this movie, and then I look at my little notes to where I'm gonna put the screenshots, and it's only been like 5 minutes. So I have some thoughts. We're pretty much off book. I'm waiting until she records her song. That's where the pencil is. I want to see if the song is the same. 3 big things. 1, Infamous Mills, who's supposed to be D-Nice in the book. They have a conversation and then he sings a song. We really never hear any of D-Nice's songs in the book, so that's a huge change in the movie. I mean, like, that's fine, right? I really like Curtis in the book with Bree. I really like Curtis. I'm kind of sad that Curtis isn't going to be in the movie and that it's Malik. I didn't really like Malik for Brianna in the book, so that kind of makes me sad. So Infamous Mills and Malik and Bree, not my favorite. But what I am liking that we're seeing more depth of is what's going to happen between Sunny and Miles. I like how they're making that more obvious in like the club scene and some of their just little interactions. I really like that that's getting fleshed out more, because I almost wished, like, that was something I wish was more fleshed out in the book. In hindsight, knowing who Miles is and the Instagram messages, like, now that feels a little more fleshed out, but I'm really happy we're actually seeing this. Also, I'm looking at my Amazon screen. I don't know if it'll be in the screenshot. Lil Yachty is Infamous Mills. I had no idea. I thought he looked familiar. I thought that was pretty cool. I like Sunny and Miles' relationship being expanded upon. I really don't like Malik and Bree together. And then, again, Infamous Mills and Bree's conversations, like, okay, I understand, you know, needing to move the movie forward and explaining why Infamous Mills is going to come back to the garden, kind of setting up that final scene. That makes sense. Okay, so I feel like we had two major scenes that happened in the past. Talk for 13 minutes since I've said something. We have Bree recording her song. Some of the lyrics do come from the song that's in the book. I think obviously some changes are just so, you know, she doesn't say the F word and like up the rating of the movie, but she says it in the book. The motivation behind the song, completely different, because when Bree does it in the book, you know, she's so frustrated with the situation that had just happened with Tate and Long, and her aunt isn't supporting her, and she's trying to say that she doesn't need that life, but she's seen it. The motivations are just different, whereas in the movie, Supreme's like, you have to act this role. Now, Bree and Supreme do have that conversation like 200 pages later in the book, once they're actually interacting. Supreme explaining to Bree that she needs to act a certain way, talking about what white kids from the suburbs like. That conversation doesn't happen until way later in the book, after the song is already made. And again, Bree's intentions, I think, are very different in the movie compared to the book. Like, she's a much more complicated character in the book. And I think that with the relationship that they've made between Supreme and Bree, like, Bree is looking more and more unlikable in the movie, I think, in terms of like the sellout and like how she's treating Malik and everything like that. Like, that doesn't happen in the book. Speaking of Malik and Bree do have a conversation in the book about her song. Malik has like another girl in the picture in the book, and you know, he says he doesn't like it because of the guns and stuff, and Brianna tries to explain like, no, this is what I'm really saying, this is the context of the whole song. And Malik brings up, you know, people aren't just gonna listen to the whole song, they might just hear a snippet, and what you say in certain snippets sound bad. So I feel like the conversation had more complexities in the book, and they're almost cheapening it in the movie, which I don't like, because I love the complexities that are in the book. Those are my thoughts. Definitely the book has more depth. They're trying to, again, mesh, like, again, kind of pick and choose what parts they want from the book, not really caring about the exact chronological order of the book. And I get it because they have less time. But in the same vein, I feel like they took away some of the complexities that are clearly in the book that just aren't as portrayed in the movie, which sucks. I wish it was portrayed better. Okay, this is something that I didn't mention before that I want to make sure I mention now. I think they changed the timeline of how long Jay has been clean in the movie. They said 3 years. I think it's definitely longer in the book that she's been clean and that they've been together as a family. Because right now she's in like a meeting, you know, as a recovering addict. Jay hosts those meetings at her house in the books. Like, she just looks so much further in her recovery journey in the book as compared to the movie. And I'm kind of curious why they did that, like why they changed it so much. I feel like that's a pretty big difference to go from you're attending a meeting, acting timid and scared as in the movie, versus you're leading the meeting, you're confident in your recovery as it is in the book. So just a very different characterization of Jay overall. I think another big difference in the movie and the book is how much money Bree is getting in her hands. For example, winning money from her first battle, now Supreme giving her money. So I think it's a lot more obvious that money is a big motivator for Bree. Whereas I feel like in the book it is a motivator, but it's not like the sole motivator, because more of her motivation in the book I feel like is helping her family and because she loves rap and wanting to connect with her father while also not being her father. Just more complexities in the book. I feel like they're just cheapening it down to money in the movie, which is not my favorite tactic. They only have so much time, I guess, but I don't know. I feel like this could be a great show, having more time to show the complexities. So Pooh is coming in to confront Bree about her song, which happens in the book. In the movie, though, the confrontation is happening in front of Jay and Trey. It does not happen in the book. It takes Jay a while to figure out Bree even has a song out there, and Jay hears it through the news. Very different timeline on both fronts, because Pooh is a little more reactive once she hears the song, and then it takes like 150-ish pages, I think, before Jay even learns about it. And a big element that's missing, I feel like, is the school element, because Malik had a little line when him and Brianna were having their romantic moment or whatever, and he's like, Tate and Long got suspended. And that's not what happens in the book. A big part of the book is Tate and Long not being suspended, but being reinstated, and students having a protest. Not as much focus on those school and racial issues, a lot more focus on the poverty issue. I don't know why. I feel like, shying away from that, maybe there'll be something in these next 40-some minutes where, they address Tate and Long like they were addressed in the book, but I'm not 100% sure. Jay and Pooh definitely don't talk about the song together with Bree. That's not something that happens in the book, so definitely a movie choice in that case. Well, who spoke too soon? I did. They do get back to school and do see Tate and Long. I am getting confused with Malik's role, because Malik is one of the big ones in terms of setting up a protest and being that activist figure, and since he's more the romantic interest now, I thought that that protest aspect would also take a back seat. And I guess technically it did, because it wasn't as organized. They were saying 2 lines from Bree's song, and then someone throws a glass and hits Long in the head, but there's a full out fight that happens in the book, and people get arrested, including Brianna's love interest in the book's friend gets arrested. And so it's a lot more complicated of an issue that I feel like in the movie, because someone just throws glass at the guy's head and he's down on the ground. I don't know. Again, just that whole school deal is a lot shorter, and I wish that was more fleshed out, which is why I wish it was a show. We'll see what's gonna happen. Sorry for speaking too soon. I spoke 4 minutes too early. My bad. So we just saw 2 interactions, Bree and her mother after the incident at the school, and then Bree and Trey talking. I feel like they're making Bree so much more, I don't know, she almost feels like an island against her family in the movie, whereas everything she was doing in the book was for her family. So I feel like that motivation being changed is pretty stark. I felt like when reading the book, Bree was doing everything she could for her family. She wouldn't insult her brother. Yes, she would hide things from her mom, but she would not insult her mom. And I feel like that is a huge difference that I'm not really happy that the movie took, honestly. Now Bree and Malik are about to talk again, and I just want Curtis from the book to be in the movie, but that's not gonna happen. We also did get a call that Bree is going to be on the radio. So that is on page 350 in the book. So we're, getting close to the end. There looks like there's about 35 minutes left of the movie, if not maybe a little less, just because I don't know how long credits are. I just wish, again, the complexities that I feel like Bree had and the motivations Bree had in the book were a little bit clearer in the movie. That was a choice someone made, or maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. Okay, so a little bit more in order, getting back in order of the book a little bit. We have Malik and Bree make up again in more of a romantic way, whereas in the book it's definitely more friendship based. This is where Bree gets her chain taken, and it's a very high tense, scary situations. Again, I feel like they're picking and choosing what's accurate, what they're doing, what they're not. I like that they kept this scene in, because again, it shows Brianna the consequences of her actions And again, people taking the song, just hearing a snippet, and again, not listening to the context like she had said before. So I'm interested to see what Aunt Pooh is going to do now, because she's obviously not in prison, and she's not in prison at this point in the book either. And, you know, Bree calls Pooh in the book and wants it somewhat taken care of, but then she gets nervous because she doesn't want the guy killed in the book. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen now afterwards. What are the reactions going to be? And I'm curious, they're involving Jay a lot more. So is Jay going to now be involved in hearing about this incident? Because Jay doesn't find out about this incident with the crowns until later. So we're about to enter like a very different scenario from what happens in the book, because in the book, after Bree has her chain robbed, who does interact with the crowns in some sort, and then the crowns get revenge on the garden disciples. So in the book, we have Aunt Pooh confronting the crowns about Bree getting her chain robbed, and the crowns, in terms of enacting revenge, I think give information to the police or some sort to where SWAT runs in on Pooh and her operation, and Pooh gets arrested. But in the movie, Pooh's now gotten shot, which is, again, very different than what happened in the book. So again, we're taking a bit of a deviation. I was curious what was going to happen, since we hadn't really seen any of the trailer park that the Garden Disciples were really in, where that's a bigger focus in the book that hasn't been shown at all in the movies. So it makes sense why they changed what happened to Aunt Pooh. So the hype interview has happened. We learned that Pooh is going to jail after she receives medical care. And in the hype interview, the reason that Bree gets mad and leaves the interview in the book is because hype accuses her of having a ghostwriter. In the movie, we have where she gets up and leaves because talking about the differences between what she can rap and what her dad rapped, and he's trying to affiliate her with a gang. And then he brings up her aunt getting shot, and that's why she leaves in the movie. So again, more of a focus on money, different motivations, everything like that. I'm very interested to see what's gonna happen moving forward, because I feel like this is where, at least in the book, Bree kind of turns over a leaf after this interview and decides she doesn't want to play this role anymore. She doesn't want to work with Supreme. So I assume that's kind of what's going to happen in the movie, but we'll see, again, how much is similar between the two. Okay, so I feel like we just had two pretty accurate moments compared to the book and the movie. So the conversation between Supreme and Bree, where Lawless is basically admitting, like, your dad was a gangster, I set him up to act like that. And again, like, that's part of the reason that he was killed. So I feel like that was an important conversation between Supreme and Bree that had to happen. And then there was this conversation that Bree and her mom have right after the interview. And while the conversation happens, and eventually there's reconciliation at the end of it, we're on page like 398, 399. The conversation is a lot softer in the movie than I feel like it was in the book. In the book, I feel like there was complexities between Jay asking Bree, like, who are you? Is this who you want to be? Whereas in the movie, it was like, I'm so sorry, I take responsibility. And so I feel like, again, the conversation happening right after the interview was accurate, but the tone was a little different. And now we're going to the school board meeting, which has already happened earlier in the book. So again, picking and choosing our order for the movie, not exactly following the book. So we just watched the school board meeting happen, which again, in the book is very different because it's where Jay goes up to the superintendent after the meeting and talks with him. She still does a very public speech in the movie as she does in the book, but there's a separate conversation in the book after all of that happens where she talks to the superintendent and she actually applies for a job at the school. So we kind of lose that storyline. And what I like is that afterwards, Miles and Sunny's relationship is made clear. In the book, they like meet up for the first time, but in the movie, their relationship is really clear. So again, I like what they did with the Sunny and Miles storyline. I feel like it's, again, a lot more spelled out. I wish we, again, knew the status of Jay having a job in the movie. I don't think that's very clear. So now we're going to the, final scene that's going to happen in the ring, where we don't have grandparents at all in this movie, so quite a few scenes that we get in the book aren't in the movie, which makes me kind of sad because I feel like the grandparents and the relationship Jay rebuilds with them is pretty vital. We're just going straight to the ring with Infamous Mills or Lil Yachty. Okay, so the movie has ended. I was a little shocked at the way it ended. Very similar to the book, I guess, where like we don't fully get a resolve on what Bree's next steps are. But I will say I do miss the Curtis aspect that was in the book that was not in the movie at all. The ending in the movie was also completely different because Bree and D-Nice were supposed to do their song together at the ring, but instead it was a battle between Infamous and Bree. And this time they went 3 rounds to determine a winner. So again, big difference. Nothing at all the same as in the book. I, like I said, wish the epilogue was in there. I think the epilogue really added to the book. And obviously, like, we're missing a few key points, key characters, with like Mystique not being as involved, Shayna, who was Malik's girlfriend in the book, not being involved, the coalition that was formed at the school not being involved at all. So in terms of like accuracy to the book, it was very like cherry picked on what they wanted to do. Didn't really follow the exact structure, cut characters, things like that. I don't think it was the worst like book to movie adaptation. I think the part that makes me hesitant is really the romantic aspect of it. Like, I wish that was more like the book and less like what they did in the movie. I would definitely recommend the book. Like I said, I think the movie was okay compared to the book. I can see how people would really like the movie without reading the book. When you read the book, I feel like that's just already like the perfect movie just wrapped up into words. So let me know if you like these. I hopefully will do something like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one.